Tonight, Medway's elected representatives are all gathered to debate the budget. Such a process of scrutiny and accountability is an integral part of any democracy. However, the tragic news we saw this morning shows that there are some places in the world where these freedoms cannot be taken for granted. The Labour Party position on this is clear. The further Russian invasion into the Ukraine territory is an attack on a democratic government by a corrupt, autocratic regime. Such an attack is not only an affront to Ukraine, but to all of us who treasure democratic values. Therefore, I'm sure the whole chamber will join in me in expressing solidarity with the people of Ukraine and in hoping that both of our parties up in Westminster can continue to work together on a cross-party basis to try and stop Russian aggression. And let's send a message loud and clear from St George's Centre tonight: Medway stands with Ukraine. Mayor Aldous, we find ourselves tonight at a point in Medway, like the rest of the country and indeed the rest of the world, that has had a 2-year struggle that none of us could have possibly imagined. I welcome the Leader of the Council asking for that minute's silence tonight. It's the right thing to do, because we have seen, tragically, 909 Medway residents, our friends, our family members, our neighbours, our co-workers who have lost their lives. And our thoughts continue to be with everyone who has been impacted by those heartbreaking losses. We've seen inspirational volunteering from people who have made sure that they were there to support those who were isolated, to make sure that food was delivered, that the vaccine programme was rolled out. And that is, of course, alongside key workers from retail to care workers, blue light workers to our armed forces, from our hard-working council staff here in Medway to the women and men of our National Health Service. With all of those individuals, of course, we've seen the people of Medway playing by the rules, staying at home, getting tested, doing the right thing. Compare that to the actions of those in the highest office in the land, number 10 Downing Street, and our Prime Minister, well, not my Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, currently under investigation by the Metropolitan Police for making the rules and then breaking the rules. Boris Johnson is the first Prime Minister to ever be questioned under caution. He knows he clearly misled Parliament. He denies he knew anything about events that he was at. He previously lied to the Queen. He's not fit to be our Prime Minister. Frankly, he should do the honourable thing and resign. And why does that matter here? I'll tell you why it matters here, because if we have another COVID variant, and I hope that we don't, but if we do, that needs everybody to step up again, the people of Medway to do the right thing again, some people will understandably say, if the Prime Minister isn't following the rules, then why should I? Frankly, Johnson must go. But as we look at the budget tonight, it isn't just Boris Johnson's rule breaking we see from this government. As we're considering this report, Medway residents, those that will receive the council tax bills we're talking about tonight, are having to deal with the highest level of inflation for 30 years. Whether it's transport costs, food costs, energy bills, we are seeing our residents under more pressure than ever. The latest statistics indicate that more than 10,000 households that we represent in Medway are already experiencing fuel poverty. This is before eye-watering bill increases and a further wave of cost of living impacts. Domestic energy prices we've never seen higher. And we see Rishi Sunak coming up with a loan scheme, which most people simply don't want, and they're going to be forced upon them, which will actually add future pressures to their bills moving forward. That is alongside a scheme which we've only received some clarity about in the last 24 hours, but we still have no clear indication as to what we will have to do. If there's a war widow in Medway who currently pays us nothing, well, how are we going to make sure that they get their support? If somebody moves from a Band E to a Band B because of their outgoings, meaning they've got to move, how are we going to help them? This scheme, the current setup of it, was a soundbite with no substance from Sunak, and it's left local government, councils like Medway, to once again pick up the pieces. So we see tonight the maximum possible increase in council tax without a costly referendum. The increases in fees and charges, the increase from the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner's precept, add all more additional pressures to families across Medway. And for those living in parished areas, not myself, but others in this chamber and elsewhere, some of those communities will see their parish precepts going up by 55%. And the sad reality is, even at this point, so early on in the cost of living crisis, we've seen food bank usage here at our own Medway Food Bank up to more than 12,500 people, including more people ever in work where the wages don't cover the monthly costs. That, Madam Mayor, is 2022 Medway. That is a shameful state of affairs. And those in work will also see more than a 10% increase in national insurance, more pressure on family finances. And why is that being increased? Well, perhaps one day we would hope here in this chamber to help fund social care. But for the foreseeable future, it will help fund the NHS. Now, some people might be saying, hold on a minute, didn't Boris Johnson drive a bus promising £350 million a week for the NHS if we vote for Brexit? The bus didn't say that money would come not from the EU, but from hard-working women and men paying more tax. Brexit has seen one job opportunity, and that's for Jacob Rees-Mogg. And so far, all he's done is written to a national paper going, I've got no ideas, I need some help. And some people in this chamber campaigned for that. They need to remember that. And as you'll see clearly on page 137, that national insurance increase also has a direct impact on our council finances to the tune of around £750,000. Once again, a decision taken by Whitehall impacting badly on Medway's local government budget. So much for taking back control. So what about the latest local government buzz phrase, levelling up? The reality is, we've seen councils across England take real terms cuts year after year after year. Here in Medway, the administration may be able to point to some crumbs from the table, but the reality is we have seen real terms cuts to our finances, and ultimately that hits the front line. Our hard-working women and men serving our communities in so many different services, often going above and beyond, so flexible and determined over the past 2 years in particular. And tonight, even with this last-minute amendment, we'll still see this Conservative administration vote to give them a real terms pay cut. This additional funding still doesn't take them to a point of even keeping pace with inflation. It simply isn't good enough. And let's be perfectly honest here, and this is a painful paragraph for me to read. Medway Council is no longer an employer of choice. It is an employer of convenience, an employer of last resort, an employer of real terms cuts in living standards, an employer with its own staff accessing food banks. Disgraceful. And alongside alongside this below inflation pay increase for staff, we see this council trying to get away with paying 50% less than Kent County Council when it comes to resolving the issue of term time workers in schools. Does Alan Jarrett care half as much as Roger Goff? Does this Conservative administration think that those low-paid staff are worse than their counterparts the other side of Bluebell Hill? Now, this is being looked at by ACAS, with GMB ready, willing and able to discuss a meaningful offer. And I hope we see an end, as one person put it to me, of this council trying to diddle the dinner ladies out of a fair settlement for this industrial issue impacting on some of our lowest paid staff. You can't on the one hand go out on a Thursday night and clap key workers and then cut their pay on a real terms basis and try and settle with the lowest settlement of an industrial issue when it comes to those people who have been front and centre at trying to keep our schools open, particularly throughout those last 2 years. Come back to the table with a truly meaningful offer to resolve this issue. Now, residents with a keen eye for their council finances will see that we are likely to make this budget balance on the back of one-off capital receipts and reserves. This is not sustainable and leaves this council in a precarious position. Let's be clear, this is a Conservative council who might try and use the rhetoric of somehow being different from their chums in Westminster, but the reality is they campaigned for them to be there, they delivered their leaflets, and they have failed to condemn when it comes to making the rules, them breaking the rules. Now, across this budget, we are seeing restructures of different parts of the council. One concern the Labour and Co-Operative group has is the potential workloads for those who remain. We must see impact assessments for any change programme that comes forward. Otherwise, we risk a real and possible danger of any of those new structures having workloads beyond any one individual's capacity. Now, one area we are seeing proposed staff coming back to the council is the return of the staffing agency back in-house rather than sitting with Kindy. This is to be welcomed. But the question people will rightfully ask is, why did you bother outsourcing this work to Kindy in the first place? And it must also lead to the question, ultimately now, what is the point of Kindy? It's now basically delivering two services, CCTV and telecare, which could easily be done by the council directly. It's lost several other contracts, including with other neighbouring local authorities. Now, let's not forget, although it's changed its name from Medway Commercial Group, we certainly haven't forgotten there is still an ongoing police investigation into this council-owned business, with 3 people arrested last summer and more people subsequently interviewed by the police, reported today by the Medway Messenger. It's not just central government where there are ongoing police investigations. This is the same organisation, currently under investigation by the police, which this leader of the council said he was happy for them to run everything apart from social services. Well, he was wrong then, and he's wrong now. Talking of the police, we know that there is increasing concerns which are real and genuine across Medway when it comes to the issue of community safety, particularly around the issue of violence against women and girls. Medway has the 6th highest rate of reporting of crime in unitary authorities, with some wards in Medway being within the highest reported in Kent. Tonight, we will see this council note the increase in what our residents pay locally for their police force. Don't forget, it was in this very chamber at the last council meeting, Medway Labour was saying we need to see an increase of 80 officers in Medway to tackle those community issues, and Conservative councillors voting against it, showing really there is only one true party standing up on law and order. We have seen this council make positive progress on the vital issue of children's services, coming, of course, from a very poor starting point. The second inadequate Ofsted in 6 years, with a still substandard requires improvement in the middle of that. We, as the opposition group, have been clear we want to support the service in improving, and I pay tribute to elected members and officers on all sides of making that progress. But we're not there yet. So it's incredibly concerning that we see more than £7.5 million of cuts to children's budgets tonight. Of course, we want to see the right level of resources. We want invest to save projects to come forward, but quite frankly, they've been too slow in coming forward in the past. We should be at the saving bit now, not the investing bit. And the question that must be asked, if we're taking around £4 million from the budget for children's services when it comes to placements, what contingencies are there in place if we do see that potential increase in this vital area of public service? And of course, it's not just looked after children. Our schools are now having to have their budgets cut to pay out for out-of-area placements, when it's actually central government funding which is most needed for these vulnerable children. Where is that funding from central government? Well, it's probably in the same place as those so promised little extras that never actually come to fruition. Now, alongside children's services, the pressures on the adult social care budgets continue, and I have real fears that some of the expected savings, which are predicated on funding coming back from the NHS partners, may not come to pass, therefore leaving a gap in the requirements. Of course, one of the main issues when it comes to care, and my friend and colleague Councillor Murray refers to this repeatedly, is the fact that we are at the mercy of the market. If a company, large or small, just folds, and we've seen it in the past, it is left to the council to pick up the pieces. Not having our own care provision leaves us as an authority more vulnerable than ever, and certainly doesn't give our Medway residents the confidence that their loved ones will have the best possible care, whatever the situation. Now, throughout the various budget plans tabled tonight, there are changes to how this organisation deals with its legal services. Historically, we've not been able to retain professionals due to low rates of pay. We've had a siloed approach. Changing that is to be welcomed. However, the estimated savings, I believe, are extremely stretching. Of course, there is one way this council could potentially make savings on legal costs. Due to the failure to produce a viable, up-to-date local plan, we as a council leave ourselves wide open to legal challenges on all sides, whether that's judicial reviews or planning appeals, often costing taxpayers hundreds of thousands of pounds. So we need a local plan which has the support of the majority of Medway councillors. And until we see confirmation the designation of Chatham Docks remains an employment zone, it is highly unlikely it will be voted for by a majority of councillors. That would save this council a substantial amount of revenue funding on legal challenges, instead of which we see at the October council meeting the local plan reports on the agenda tabled with substantial, serious, important information missing, only to have that report withdrawn at the last minute. That's not good enough. We are nearly 20 years on from our last local plan. The people of Medway expect more from their council. Now, I recognise the financial pressures we have as a unitary authority because of the last 2 years. The leader and I have spoken about that in the past, and that is something we agree on. The top-tier pressures of children and adult services, the highways issues, which are not helped by the reduction of the much-lauded pothole fund, but also the second-tier authority pressures, which I'll now turn to. I am concerned that this budget tonight is assuming everything will go back to where we were pre-pandemic when it comes to a variety of budget lines. Those assumptions, in my opinion, do not take into account the cost of living crisis we are about to commence upon. Extreme increases in utility bills, 30-year high inflation, which will have a direct impact on people being able to choose to go to Medway Park, enjoy a show at the Central Theatre, or indeed park their car in our town centres. I fear we will see large shortfalls in those expectations with the future budgeting monitoring reports. And what about the jewel in the crown? The Pentagon Centre. The expected income level has fallen dramatically short of what was anticipated, and it desperately needs urgent remedial work. Now, it's a well-worn political cliche of government fixing the roof when the sun is shining. This Conservative council failed to fix the roof and had to shut the Pentagon on Monday because it had literally flooded. This is, of course, one of the things that may have been coming to the attention of evaluators if we had more than one valuation when we purchased it, proposed by the Labour group, rejected by the Conservatives. There may be some of you saying, well, where are your amendments then? Well, let's have a look at the last couple of years of sensible, positive proposals from the Labour and Co-Operative group rejected by this administration. Name blind recruitment, rejected. Saving Chatham Docks, long before some others came around to the campaign, rejected. A report on modern slavery, rejected. Protections from Kent Lorry Park plans, rejected. Retaining the universal credit uplift, rejected. Additional COVID protections for early year settings, rejected. Saving Chatham Docks again, rejected. Reinstating the universal credit uplift, rejected. More police officers for Medway, rejected. With all of those rejected, why on earth would we expect this Conservative administration to support any sensible, positive proposals tonight? And once again, and we heard it from the leader, let's put to rest that absolute nonsense that we will probably hear again and again, that by voting for this budget, it means we are voting against every single item within it. That is simply untrue, and you know it. Unlike those things I've listed, which were clear, straightforward, single-issue votes. Mayor Aldous, the Labour and Co-Operative group will be voting against the budget proposals this evening. We refuse to support a financially irresponsible budget placed upon questionable projections and unsustainable one-off payments. A Labour-run council wouldn't have waited 20 years to bring forward some investor save programmes or fail to bring forward a local plan. We refuse to endorse a budget that means, despite today's amendments, another real terms pay cut for hard-working staff in Medway who have served our community in an outstanding way with such circumstances over the last 2 years. A Labour-run Medway Council would value our hard-working staff and certainly wouldn't be trying to diddle the dinner ladies. We will not approve a budget that puts at jeopardy the good, positive, collective progress made in children's services, which, as we stand here today, still are classified as inadequate. A Labour-run Medway Council would be investing in our children and the next generation in Medway, and certainly wouldn't be cutting the children's budget by more than £7.5 million. What we can see tonight in this council chamber is a clear contrast. A divided Conservative group in disarray with no positive vision for Medway and literally no plan, against a Labour group united in our resolve that the people of Medway deserve better than what this failing administration is offering. Last year's by-elections in Rochester East, and in particular Strood North, prove that the Medway public share our frustrations with this current administration, and this inadequate Tory budget will do nothing to save their sinking ship. May 2023 can't come quick enough. Thank you, Mayor Aldous.